So welcome to our first YouTube tutorial. Today we're going to be showing you how to make this Gerble hand puppet. They are really great as a beginner puppet pattern. If you're just getting started, they're easy to use, really light, really small, and so customizable as well. You can see on screen there's just lots of different characters and expressions that you can create with this pattern. And so it's a great jumping off point if you're just getting started in puppet making and you want a nice simple design. So the link is in the description of this video to download the pattern, and everything is scaled to fit on A4 pieces of paper, so just print it out and you should be ready to go. The file should contain the head shape pattern, mouthplate pattern, and both sides of the neck sleeve. So the first thing you're going to want to do is cut along the designated lines with some scissors. Once you've played with this pattern a few times and you like it, you may want to transfer onto more hard-wearing material like cardboard or plastic. We actually 3D print our patterns once we're 100% happy with them. They last a lot longer that way, but starting off, paper should be fine for your first one. With the round mouthplate pattern, make sure to cut out the holes where the 4 indicated marks are, as you're going to need that when you're drawing around the foam. So we have 15mm reticulated foam, but you can use upholstery foam or any other that you have on hand that you like to work with. When you draw around them, just remember to indicate where the top is going to be for your mouthplate. It doesn't matter which of the 4 you use as your top, just make sure you indicate it so that you know where it is when you sew it into the head. And also drag the marks from the front down the sides of the foam because you'll need to be able to see them when you sew. Now, for gluing the mouthplate to the mouthplate fleece, we're using black fleece here, we're going to use contact adhesive, but you can use other forms of glue, spray glue, hot glue, those sorts of things, and make sure you are only gluing it in the center of the mouthplate. Leave a nice little border around the outside of the foam so that you can sew through it later, because when this glue hardens, it'll be rock solid and you will not be able to get the needle through it. So once those 2 pieces are glued together, you can cut around the outside of the fleece. Don't worry if the cut is not perfect. Puppet making does not have to be perfect, and it's all going to be sewn inside the fur and none of it will be visible. So do not stress about this being a perfect circle. Moving on to the head shape for our Gerble hand puppet. So we have our chosen faux fur that we're going to use here, and we're going to have 2 of this head shape. You're going to want to flip it so we have a mirror image and draw around that on the underneath of your fur. So again, flipping it to make sure that you have the 2 separate parts that you're going to need to sew together. Now for cutting out fur, you can use lots of different things. You can use scissors and just carefully trim the backing to make sure that you don't actually trim any of the fur. We're going to use blades. They are hair trimming blades and they are very, very sharp, so please be careful, and scissors are always a great option. Now, as you can see, we are cutting everything with a seam allowance apart from 2 sections. That is the right angled mouth section and also the rounded neck section. Those both need to be exact, but everything else can have a nice little border as a seam allowance for when you're sewing. However much you would normally give yourself, but here it's about 5mm. So moving on to the sewing section, you can do this with the needle and thread if you prefer hand sewing, but we're going to use a machine today to sew because it is quicker and a little bit more accurate. But if you're just getting started or if you don't have access to a sewing machine yet, then hand sewing can also work really well. So the first thing you're going to want to do is on each side of your puppet's head is sew the smallest dart at the top. Do that on both sides, and then you're going to push the 2 sides fur facing each other and sew the long line from the top of the mouth all the way to the top of the neck. Take as much time as you need with this, feeding it into the sewing machine carefully so that you can keep all of the fur away from the stitch. This makes sure that all of the fur stays nice and fluffy on the inside and you don't have it all caught up in the seam. It makes sewing a little bit easier as well, but this can take a little bit of practice, so don't stress, don't try and rush. And remember, practice makes perfect. So once those 2 bits are sewn together, we have one more stitch for this section, and it is at the very bottom of the pattern. Remember to fold the fur in on itself again so you have a nice clean line to sew along, and this will be connecting the 2 parts of the puppet's head together. But there is no need to sew the head or the neck section closed. Once that's complete, you can trim all of the loose threads and just tidy it up a little bit, and this is how your puppet should look so far. You can kind of see how that does look like the portrait of a face, with the neck hole still open and the mouth hole still open. Now, our next step is to sew the foam mouthplate into the puppet's head. Now remember how we have the top indicated on the foam with a T, and that correlates to the top of the mouth indicated on the pattern. So you want to flip that over so that the black fleece is pointing inside the puppet's mouth and touching the fur. The foam part of the mouth plate should be facing down and it should be touching the sewing machine. Everything looks inside out right now, but that's how you know it will look right side out in just a moment. Again, carefully making sure that the fur is tucked away so that we don't sew through it. Feed that slowly and carefully through the sewing machine. Take your time and don't rush. Again, this can take a little bit of practice. But the 4 marks that we made on the mouth plate will help you line it up with the seams and the corners of the mouth as you're sewing it in, so it can help to do it in sections, with 2 of the marks correlating with the top and the bottom of the mouth and 2 with the corners. Once that's sewn in, we're going to move on to cutting out our neck sleeve pattern. So again, much like the mouth plate, you can do this in any color fleece you like. We only choose black because it is simple and goes with a lot of different colors, so very versatile, but you can do it in any color of fleece that you like. So we're going to cut out both sides of the neck sleeve pattern and we're going to tape them together down the center line as indicated. And we're going to use some chalk to draw around our pattern on the fleece. Again, don't worry too much about this being perfect. You're going to give yourself a nice healthy seam allowance along the sides and the bottom, and so you can clean all of that up later when you sew the hems. Do not give a seam allowance on the top neck section because this is the bit that's going to be sewn into the puppet's head, and we do need this one to be exact. So we're just rolling the hem on the very bottom of the neck sleeve and sewing it up. And then we're going to fold the neck sleeve in half and we're going to sew the seam along the side. So your neck sleeve should look something like this. So we'll just do the final stitch and then you can trim off the extra thread, tidy it up a little bit. And it is a Gerble neck sleeve ready to be sewn together with the head. Now this bit can get probably the most tricky out of any step in this tutorial. Only because we've done it wrong so many times, so we definitely need to be clear. Make sure the head is turned right side out so you can see the fur, you can see the coloured fleece mouth plate, and then tuck that inside the neck sleeve exactly as we had just sewn it up. So the neck sleeve is still inside out, but the fur head is right side out. And again, take some time to make sure that the fur is all tucked away from the seam that you are about to create. Before you start sewing, make sure that you can see the seams on the inside of the Gerble's head as we're about to sew them to the neck sleeve. Again, take it slowly and make sure you do it in sections, tucking all the fur in as you go. This will just help make things a lot easier. Making a Gerble is a marathon and not a sprint. And don't forget that stitches can be unpicked as well. So even making mistakes are not going to be a problem with this pattern at all. Practice makes perfect, but stitches can be unpicked. As you can see, even speeding this up 1,000 times, and we've made hundreds of these, it can still take a really long time. But once the stitches are done, again, just trim off the excess thread. Make sure that your stitch is nice and flat and it hasn't bunched anywhere, and then grab inside, grab the Gerble's head and pull it out, and you should have the puppet the right way around with the neck tube attached just like this. If it hasn't turned out just like this, you do not need to worry, it can be redone. Now, a little trick that we like to do whilst it's still in the inside out stage is to cut across the very middle of the foam mouth plate. This just makes moving the mouth a lot easier, it frees it up a little bit, and it gives the mouth plate a kind of natural opening point. Again, you can use scissors or blades for this. Please be very careful and don't press down too hard if you are using a blade because it can cut through to the foam. Make sure the top of the mouth plate is at the top and you're cutting from side to side, and just make a shallow little line to free up the mouth plate for movement. Now you can press it right way out again and your Gerble should look something like this with whatever colour scheme you have chosen. And hopefully you're very happy with it. Now moving on to features, this is where the fun customization of these puppets comes in. They can look like anything you want them to look like. You can put one eye on, 5 eyes on, horns, teeth, tongue, anything, and they are so easy to customize. Now with our own for professional use, we do use our 3D printed cabochon eyes a lot of the time, but you can use anything from ping pong balls to the back of plastic spoons to ones you've made out of cardboard, absolutely anything. But we like to use this interchangeable system because It is foolproof and nice and professional and long wearing. We like horns and colourful cabochon eyes and tongues. Everything can be hot glued on as well if you don't want to use the bolt back attachments. But at this stage you can do whatever you want. There's no tutorial to follow when it comes to bringing out the personality of your puppet. They can be any character, and I think that is the fun thing with this really simple design. You can really use your imagination to bring it to life. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was explanatory enough. Leave us a comment down below if you would like anything else explained. The pattern is in the description box, and thank you so much to our Patreon members who make content like this possible. You can subscribe for less than the price of a coffee per month. You'll get your name here at the end of every video. There's lots of fun perks, Discord server, discount codes. And for members of the Forbidden Ice Cream Sandwich tier and above, you get patterns like this completely free. So head over there if you would like to get in on that, and don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube for many more tutorials coming soon.